gonna get. All right. So, put it up here. I do have your tests. I'll give it to you guys at the end, so whoever wants to look at it, look at it. Whoever doesn't want to look at it, they can go home. I forgot to check the average, but it was pretty good. I mean, the average I think was in high 70s from remembering the grades and all of that. So, the number one question missed was that hydrogen peroxide thing. And the other interesting thing was the question one where I said how it will stop protein synthesis. A group of you guys started telling me how to prevent cell wall synthesis. Protein synthesis, not cell wall, protein synthesis. So, okay, so for the next test, oh, by the way, today's Wednesday, yes, it's Wednesday. Next week, next week, for our lab, we're gonna start with our unknowns. On Monday, I'll put it on Canvas. Let's meet up here. I'm just gonna introduce unknowns to you guys. What is this, how are we gonna go about it? What is it, the things that you should do? You know, all the stuff about unknowns. So I will prep you for it, even the reports, how you should write the reports, all of that. And then on Wednesday, you will get your unknowns. Every person will get their own unknown. It will be a solid, so it would be on a slant, and you get it, and you start your gram staining on Wednesday based on that. Then you will decide what you're gonna do. I'll go through it. You're gonna go media shopping with me. You're gonna order your media and things like that. So that's next week, but Monday, let's meet up here because it's much more comfortable to sit in these chairs than the chairs downstairs. And I'll put it on Canvas. If I don't put it, I'll most probably remember it Monday, and I'll put a note on the lab door, meet us upstairs. And then for your next test, we've already, in the lecture, we've covered chapter 11, which was simple. The next two chapters, 12 and 13, are all about immune system. And immune system, obviously, as you noticed, two chapters covering it. It's a little bit complicated, but I think the complication is so many different cells that are involved, and it's not like, okay, this cell does something, it stops functioning, then the other cell starts doing it. Everything can happen simultaneously. How I lecture about it is introduce little characters that are involved in the immune system and how immune system, and we're focusing mostly on infectious diseases. So how does your immune system target pathogens and all of that? We won't pay attention to the other parts of it here in this class. But I'll introduce the portions, then try to separate each of the different events that happen, and kind of then at the end paint a picture of how they are interconnected to one another. We will probably be on this for 4 lectures. Okay, so it's covering the 2 chapters. The distinction is pretty good in your book. Like 12 is inflammatory response, and 13 is your specific immune response. But again, there's mix and match there. All right, immune system, human immune system. Its job is not just defending you against pathogens. Its job is actually always bringing your body back to the normal physiology, okay? Regardless of what causes that change. So even if there is no pathogen involved, and for whatever reason you damage cells, like what I did, bit my tongue, my immune system's job is I damage some cells, let's go, take care of that, remove the damaged tissue, remove damaged cells, and repair that and make sure the tongue goes back to the normal. You bump into a place, you get a bruise. Again, let's take care of that bruise, remove the bruise, remove the cells that are damaged. high blood pressure is causing micro tears in your vascular tissue, let's take care of that. Having low level of thyroid is making this and that. Again, your immune system is constantly trying to bring back everything to the happy place. So that's one of its jobs. But the other big job that we're focusing on in this class is infectious diseases. So how would affect the how does your body fight that foreign infectious agent that is in your system and somehow is causing an abnormal physiology, or even in the cases where you have immunity, your physiology is fine, but your body recognizes that this is an abnormal event. This is a type of an agent that is not supposed to, or cell that is not supposed to be there. It is the job of your immune system actually also to fight cancers, for example. Okay, so your immune system does a lot of things, but we're going to focus on infectious agents. Words that you should be aware of when it comes to immune system. One of the words is innate versus acquired. Innate means you are born with it. So every human being has this portion in them. They are born with it. For example, one of your most important innate characteristics of your immune system, or portions of your immune system, is your barriers, is your skin. Every human being is born with skin. Now, their skin, some people have the skin that keeps giving them eczemas and this and that. Some others have better skin. Regardless, a human being that survived has their skin. A baby that is born without a skin will not survive. All right? So, acquired is something that your body actually, the response that is produced is something that you produce in response to a pathogen. So a pathogen gets inside and your body, your immune system produces a response for that pathogen. So you have acquired an immune response, an immunity. The other two words are non-specific versus specific. Non-specific is where your immune system actually gets, when it gets triggered, it will show the same response or reaction regardless of what triggered it. That's basically, for us, non-specific is our inflammation. If you cut yourself, you're going to have an inflammatory non-specific response. If you get bit by a mosquito and the West Nile virus is introduced to you, first thing your body does is a non-specific response. You bump into the wall and you get a big bruise. No cuts, no pathogen, nothing. Again, inflammatory response. Your body's inflammatory response is going to be pretty much the same. You're going to have some leaking of plasma, some white blood cells traveling to the area, red blood cells getting to the area, which you get inflammation. Swelling, tenderness, pain is a way of your body to tell you something is wrong. Pay attention to here. Redness, because you have a lot of red blood cells, and loss of function. So when something is not good, they're not going to use it. When your fingers are swollen, you can't use it the way you use the other hand that is not swollen. So that's inflammation. Will be the same, whether it's a virus, whether it's a bacteria, whether it's a fungus. It's going to be the same. Then specific response is what brings you immunity. This is very specific for each virus, for each strain of a virus too. So for example, COVID, the different strains that you have unless they are very closely related to one another, then the immunity that you have for strain A might not work for strain B, which is brand new and looks different. And it actually has to do with antigens. So, however, strain A might look similar, so it will give your body some time, but your body will now produce a response that is specific to strain B. All right? So E. coli, different strains of E. coli might have different markers. So if the markers are different, they will not work. So your immune system, the specific response is acquired and is very specific. All right? So we're going to go through these parts and talk about all of them. Before doing so, first let me tell you who are the actors that are involved in your immune response. Okay? What are the things that are involved? What's their backstory? Let's get to know them, so when I tell you when you have an antigen and this cell is going to have a receptor for it, what am I talking about? So you're not lost in the word of, wait, what's antigen? So we're going to go about it that way. For the infectious diseases, so we're going to focus on when you have an infectious disease, whether it's a virus, bacteria, fungus, protozoan, element, doesn't matter. We're going to look at that and see what's the difference, how does your immune system respond to it. So your immune system has an ability to recognize self versus non-self. And this is kind of why we go back to the portion of like antibiotics versus antifungals and all of that. A chemical cannot recognize it. So if something is very similar to you and it attacks your eukaryotic cell, it can harm you too. But that's why we have a lot of antibacterial, because they have differences and we can target that, where the chemical will just target peptidoglycan and you don't have anything similar to it to attack. But if you have something that targets in eukaryotes and it's similar to yours, then it will have side effects. Your immune system is the only one that knows this is mine, this is not mine. This is mine and it's healthy, this is mine, but it's infected now. It's no longer working for me. This is a cell that is no longer considering me as its country. This is a cell that has now gone to the enemy. So I have to get rid of this cell. So your immune system is capable of doing that. And that is done with the help of markers. So markers are the ones that help. We're going to look at markers, different markers, and then we're going to look at blood, because that's where your immune cells are. Your white blood cells are there. That's where your cytokines, chemicals that are, or hormones that are released by your white blood cells that allow them to communicate with one another are released. So we're going to look at the blood and then lymphatic system. It has a function in the immune system and it's connected to your blood. All right, so let's start with markers. First one is pathogen-associated molecular patterns, or PAM. Pathogen-associated molecular patterns. So I said your immune system has a non-specific response and a specific response. All right? For non-specific response, when a pathogen gets inside your body, your inflammation knows. Your inflammatory response knows something is here, and let me start a complete general attack. And hopefully I will attack, my general attack will get rid of this pathogen. So here it's not specific, but still your immune system has to recognize something that its non-self is here. For that, they use pathogen-associated molecular patterns. So things that a pathogen can have and you won't have in your body. So PAMs. These could be things such as peptidoglycan. Peptidoglycan is something that you don't have. And your immune cells that are going around and they got a signal, something got here, inflammation, something is not right, they go there and they can actually search and they see peptidoglycan, they're like, I know you're not mine. I never make that peptidoglycan molecule. That's not part of me. Flagella, spikes of viruses. So it could be something that is very general for all of these pathogens. And on the surface of these in non-specific white blood cells, so you actually will have a group of cells that their job is to bring inflammation and a non-specific response, and a group of cells that are involved in the specific response. On the surface of these cells, you have specialized receptors, pattern recognition receptors, PRRs. Those PRRs are for recognizing CAPs. So for example, on your macrophages, which are your most important phagocytic cells, they have PRRs. And they're like, oh, peptidoglycan, that's bacteria that's not supposed to be there. Flagella, hey, I don't have flagella in this area. None of my cells are supposed to have flagella. Capsid, this, that. They can recognize that and realize that they have to trigger a response. So CAPs are responsible for your non-specific responses, your inflammatory response. And your white blood cells have receptors specific for that generalized molecular patterns that bacteria, all bacteria can have, all viruses can have. Now, what allows for specific response is what we call antigens, or antigenic markers. Antigens are a group of markers, and they typically, most of the time, are proteins. That at special areas, they have a unique shape to a portion of that protein that is unique to each individual organism. That's how they ID them. So kind of think of it as antigen could be the ID badge. Hey, I'm Sina. On all of the cells, there's a picture of Sina. That's my antigen. We not only on the surface of our cells have antigenic markers or some generalized patterns that says, okay, this is a human cell. But for each of us humans, on the surface of our cells, we have our own specific antigens that is unique to us because of the genes that we have. Nobody else has my antigens, not even my parents. My brothers might look similar to me, but it's not identical. Unless I have an identical twin, nobody else on this planet has my antigens. So all of my cells in the body have my picture labeled on it, Sina labeled on it. This is mine. And if I take any of my cells and introduce it to any of you guys will attack it like crazy. Your body will attack it. Why? It's a human cell. It's a piece of skin. It's not going to do anything, but your body recognizes that this does not have my label on it. This should not be here.
So, just out of curiosity, in blood transfusion, whenever we give like type A and type B, how would the body respond?
Your red blood cells do not have an antigenic marker on them because they do not have a nucleus. They have certain types of proteins on them, and that's type A and type B. But because they do not have specific antigenic markers, you can actually donate blood. So on blood, we don't have those antigenic markers. On your other cells, you do have it. That's why if you're doing, like even bone marrow, stem cells have it. That's why if you're doing like bone marrow transplant, you have to go and they do a histocompatibility. So to see whether or not, the only person that can give to you is the person that their marker looks almost exactly like yours. Yeah, not your twin or anything. It's just somebody, sometimes your siblings are not even close enough. Because if they're not close enough, your immune system will fight them. For those who can get a match for you, they're not identical to you, but the difference is so little that you can actually, by immunosuppressors, you tell the immune system, calm down, don't do anything for now, and the immune system eventually gets used to those cells and says, all right, I'm gonna leave them alone. Because really her ear is supposed to be like, imagine like it's a picture. Her ear is supposed to start here, but this one starts here. So it notices that little tiny difference. But immunosuppressors, basically that person who got the transplant has to take that for a while. And then after a while, the immune system is like, okay, I'm used to it. And in some cases, you see the person rejects it after 2 years. Suddenly the immune system says, we no longer accepting this. All right? So those are your antigenics. If you Google the definition of antigens, it says an antigen is a molecule that brings on an immune response and causes the production of antibodies. I think for students we should add another piece to that and say an antigen is a cell marker that may bring on an immune response. Why? Because my cells have my antigens. And if they're in the right place and they have the right antigen, they should not cause an immune response in me. But any of your antigens or an antigen of a bacteria, a virus, will cause an immune response in me. The reason I always add that, because at the beginning I used to go with the same, just it will cause an immune response. And then when I talked about autoantigens, everybody was like, so how come I have antigens? It's like, okay, everybody has a marker specific to them. Now, I'll come to this in a second. First, I'm going to go to that. For us humans, our antigens are located on a specific area. On the cells that have actually antigenic markers, they have a specific area where they're presented. So your immune cell doesn't go, okay, come on, where's your marker? Where's your label? On the surface of our cells, we have major histocompatibility complex, and that's where our markers or antigens are present. There is 2 kinds of them, so I'll come back to that and tell you about the 2 kinds. So every human being has a specific location for antigens. Now going back to this slide. In a human being, your body, your entire body, or your immune system can see possibly 3 different kinds of antigens. Starting from this end, what we call autoantigens, and they will be presented on your MHCs, major histocompatibility proteins. All of us have our autoantigens. Mine are on the surface of all of my cells that have a nucleus. A cell that does not have a nucleus, which is our red blood cells, do not have an antigen. So all of your nucleated cells will have an antigen. So an autoantigen in humans, AG is short for antigen. So autoantigen will be on the surface of MHC is major histocompatibility complex or protein. Why we call it complex? Because there's a large group of genes that produce that. So all of my cells that are nucleated, so have a nuclei. All of them, they have an MHC, major histocompatibility protein, and I show it like that we call it major histocompatibility protein type 1. However way you want to show it. It's kind of like your flagpole, or this little ID badge things. Whenever you go somewhere, you see this around somebody's neck, you're like, do you work here? If I forget this, whenever I go to grocery stores or like a store, some people come and they're like, you work here? I'm like, oops, sorry, no, wrong tag. Don't work here. But, so this is where you look for ID badges around somebody's neck. Nowadays, we do just put it there. For a flag, when you come, you look for it on the flagpole. So when you see an empty flagpole, you're like, oh, okay, I don't have the flag on it. MHC1 is where our autoantigens are always placed. So for me, the autoantigen will be there, and let's say my autoantigen looks like an S. Every cell that I have that has a nucleus, what it does, it basically, one of my genes produces my S antigen, and inside, then they're going to basically, once that antigen is made, they send it, or it's a protein, they send it to Golgi complex. MHC1 is made in Golgi complex, so Golgi. And in Golgi complex, they basically combine that MHC1 with my autoantigen and send it to the surface. They're programmed to do that. So they will always send MHC1s with the autoantigen or the antigen that was made in the cell to the surface. They're like, don't question it. Antigen made inside, attach it to MHC1, send it to surface. Those are called autoantigens. So all of your nucleated cells have your antigens on it. Now, foreign antigens can be found inside of our bodies too. And that's how your immune cell knows, oh, this thing is not supposed to be here. You have exogenous antigens. That's the pathogen itself. So a bacteria that is roaming around in your blood has its own autoantigens, bacterial antigens. And your immune system will go, it's like, what are you doing here? You're not supposed to be here. You don't belong to my body. You have the wrong flag. So we'll take it out. Exogenous means it's outside of your cells. So exogenous or exogenous, it's in your fluids. So it's a foreign antigen, non-self antigen in fluids like blood, lymph, and interstitial fluid. So they are outside of the cells. Bacteria, virus, fungus, they are outside of your cells, they're roaming around, and it's not yours. Now, endogenous or endogenous, these are non-self antigens that are somehow on the surface of your cells. Non-self antigen on the surface of the cell. And they will be on MHC1. How could that happen? How could I have an antigen that is not mine on the surface of my MHC1? What got in? A virus. So remember, a virus comes inside of your cell and says, stop doing whatever you're doing, you're under my command. And I'm commanding you to make more of my parts, put them together, and make more of me, replicate me. So a virus will have an antigen. Your cell has been programmed, and this is to the benefit of your immune system. Anytime any antigen that is made, attach it to MHC1, show it outside. So this is kind of similar to, you guys have heard, if you raise the US flag upside down, that means stress, something's wrong, help. So that's almost the same thing. Or now suddenly a house runs the flag of Germany. So they're under the command of Germany now. That's how your body, your immune system knows you are mine, but you no longer act like mine. Something has gotten inside of you and now is replacing your S's with a viral antigen. And they know this is my MHC1. So this is FLC badge, somebody stole it, takes my name and everything, and instead of that, they put their picture. Inga puts her picture, and now she goes, I'm Sinogenic Erie. So, but her picture is on it. My immune system would recognize that and say, I know this is hers, but this picture is not her. So I'm going to attack you.
So the endogenous cell, what's it called, basically takes the place of the autoantigen, right?
Yes.
So
It's a foreign antigen that your cell now is displaying. So that cell tells your immune system, I am under the control of something else. I'm no longer healthy.
so it's kind of like a distress call.
Yes.
So this is how viruses are able to be cell type specific.
Not necessarily. Cell type specific for virus is the spike. Spike interacts with something else on the surface. And then once it gets inside, though, it makes its antigen. So what your immune cell, if it sees that virus, so let's say this, okay, so this is the virus. It has its spikes and all of that. It doesn't have to be, the antigen doesn't have to be that. Let's say on the surface of it has this antigenic marker, okay? And if it was in the blood, your immune cell sees that antigen and says, kill it, take this away. If this goes inside, now what it does, so the virus goes inside, all right, has gone inside, and it's basically commanding your cell to make the capsids and all of that. So your cell is going to make the viral antigens. That's going to go to your Golgi complex. Golgi complex says, oh, okay, I'm going to put that on MHC1. So sends an MHC1 to the surface. They're constantly replacing them. And this time puts that there. And keeps adding them to the surface. As you make more antigen, it keeps sending it. So almost what ends up happening, your S's are going to be replaced, my S's are going to be replaced by the viral antigen. So now my immune cell comes and looks at this cell and a healthy cell next to it and says, what are you doing here? You are virally infected. You are no longer mine. Cancer cells is the same thing. Mutations in cancer cells become so enormous that your self-autoantigens can start changing too. Like imagine, normal picture with a Picasso drawing of mine. My nose is coming out of here, ear is on top of my head. So your immune system goes, this is no longer looking like mine, and it will attack the immune system. That's one of the biggest areas of research for cancer, where they're trying to force the immune system to recognize something as a cancer cell and attack it.
I was going to say, what are the S's in the MHC?
That's autoantigen. So I said, let's say this is mine, so S representing sign.
Oh, okay, so
So-
it's specific to the body.
Yeah. So, autoantigens, my regular correct antigens on the surface of MHC1, on all of my nucleated cells. Exogenous is just a pathogen that is outside roaming around, and they recognize them because they do not look like yours, anything like any of your cells, and they will attack it. Endogenous one is when you are infected. In our case, in our class, this is the only case that happens, is when the cell infected with a virus has taken over and it's making its antigens, and because your cells are programmed to put any antigen that is made, attach it to MHC1 and put it on the surface, it will show as an endogenous antigen. Your immune system will know you are infected by a virus. I need to take care of you. Okay. Now, so MHC1 is the one that you find on all of your nucleated cells. There is another flagpole called MHC2. MHC2 is found on two types of cells in addition to MHC1. So B cells, they're a type of white blood cells. and your macrophages. We'll look at them and see what they are. Macrophages are your phagocytic cells. They're number one phagocytic cells. They're very important. And B cells are responsible for your specific immune response. They're the ones that make antibodies. On the surface of these guys, you will have MHC1s, all right? So MHC1 with, so on my B cells and on my macrophages, I will have MHC1 with my autoantigen. But on these two, I have an additional flagpole called MHC2. Let's draw them like this. MHC2. MHC2's job is to present foreign antigens. So let's say this is a macrophage. This macrophage is roaming around. It notices there is a signal of inflammation, damage to a part of your body, goes there, and a virus has gotten in. So it sees this virus and goes through the process of phagocytosis. So it will take it in. Remember phagocytosis. It will take the virus in because it wants to destroy the virus, right? So takes the virus in, destroys the virus, but it does some other interesting thing. Takes the antigenic marker of that virus, sends it to the Golgi complex, and since Golgi complex knows that this was not made by me, I'm a macrophage, I never made that marker. However, when it went through phagocytosis, this bag came from end of phagocytosis. So it has sent it to me. This is a foreign antigen. I will present it on my MHC2. So these two cells, by doing this, talk to the rest of the immune response, your specific immune response. The macrophage basically says, hello, I am a macrophage. I belong to Sinus body. See my badge? I belong here. I am a macrophage. This is my ranking, all right? Like military. I am part of US military. This is my ranking. This is the foreign agent that I attacked. We need to get rid of this guy. So any soldiers that know specifically how to deal with this, I need your help. So it's communicating, says, I'm yours. This is the face of what we really need to get rid of. So unless I calm down, let's get our specific soldiers, snipers, and we're gonna create a specific response for this shape.
So the MHC2 is only presenting like non-self antigens?
Exactly.
Okay.
By B cells and macrophages. The only ones that have that are MHC2, are B cells and macrophages. Everything else will just have MHC1. Hang on.
So do they try to hold on to that as long as possible
They will.
and circulate?
Yes, they will circulate and they will actually release chemicals that cause your other specific immune response, your T cells, helper T cells, B cells to come to them. Macrophage will call B cells, helper T cells, and cytotoxic T cells. They're like, come to me. I need to know if you can fight this thing specifically. All right?
Do those two usually work in unison, the B cells and macrophages?
They kind of do, they don't work on one another. Macrophage is your intermediate between your inflammatory response and specific response. It's the middleman that gives the response. So it's like you have an inflammatory response, little mini soldiers that go, or the police action that happens, then they go and talk to the generals. And they say, okay, find a sniper that can kill that. Shoot at them and not anything else. So Macrophage is the middleman. It actually what causes your specific immune response to get activated. B cells is part of there. B cell, because if you produce antibodies for something that you were not supposed to produce antibodies for, then you can have a severe inflammatory and severe immune response. That if it's against something that you should not have done, that can damage your body. B cell's job is the commander-in-chief in your specific immune response is helper T cell. B cell has to get a second go-ahead from commander-in-chief who got activated from this one to say, okay, I agree with you, it's us, get activated. Otherwise, it will shut down. So, but we'll go through that again. Mario.
So, to understand the B cell, right, it's kind of like the second yes before the immune system kind of goes in.
It's not the second yes, it needs to get a second yes from a
By
helper
the
T cell.
commander, but it's kind of like a lower.
It is a very important, it will bring the specific immune response. Helper T cell does not produce a response. Cytotoxic T cells and B cells do it. B cells produce antibodies, cytotoxic T cell kills infected cells. So B cell is actually a very important one. Yeah.
Okay.
But it still needs a go-ahead from one at the top, kind of. All right? Okay, so we're good with markers and where they are? All right. See, this is why we go slow. All right. How do we get the antigens, non-self antigens? Is basically, typically, most possible way is the break in the barriers. Skin, cut it, goes inside. Mucous membrane, you breathe in the virus and it goes and interacts with the mucous membrane. Sometimes it's direct injection, well, either by needle or like a mosquito bite. Other times, organ transplants. Okay. Skin grafts. All right, now let's look at blood. So this one, you just have to create a table for yourself and just memorize what each of the type of cells do. And then I'll introduce them to you right now, but again, you will hear them in each of the either inflammatory response or specific response. Just want to let you guys know these are the cells that you find in the blood. So blood is actually made with a liquid portion, which is our plasma or serum. And in that you have the cell fragments or formed elements, which are the cells. Types of cells that you find in the blood are white blood cells, red blood cells, and platelets. White blood cells, they call them leukocytes. White means leukocytes, the other name for it. Red blood cells are erythrocyte. Platelets are platelets. Shorthand for each of them. So, WBC, white blood cells. RBC are red blood cells. Platelets, they always show them as platelets. Okay? So again, different ways of referring to them, different names. Whatever you choose, stick to that. You're fine. First, plasma in the liquid. Plasma is not just the liquid. If it was just a liquid, we call it serum. To that, in that serum, you have dissolved proteins. Types of proteins that you can have are like albumin. It's a type of blood protein that is very important in keeping osmotic pressure and pH of the blood. And then you can have inflammatory proteins. These are proteins that basically cause, their presence cause inflammation. Clotting factors. The clotting factors allows the platelets to create blood clots, so they are found in their blood. You find nutrients dissolved in the plasma. And then finally, you can also have other types of chemicals that are called complement proteins, which we'll talk about what they are. They are responsible for creating a specific attack, and it's just chemicals. They're just proteins. Red blood cells, really they themselves don't have any immune response. Their main job is they have hemoglobin, so their main job is exchange of gases. So they bring oxygen to your cells and they remove carbon dioxide. Where do we get the carbon dioxide from? What process? Biochemical process? Cellular respiration. Yeah, glycolysis, and actually typically end of Krebs cycle. So by end of Krebs cycle, you produce all the carbon dioxide. And where do we need the oxygen for? Same process. Oxygen is the final electron acceptor. So technically it doesn't have a job, but they are very important because when a cell is dividing to repair damaged tissues, so you got to cut in order to fix that, the cells need to divide. So they need a lot of ATP, so a lot of oxygen is needed, a lot of carbon dioxide is produced. Red blood cells do not have a nucleus, so they will not have MHC1, MHC2, any of that on the surface. And they will die. Because they don't have a nucleus, they can't produce proteins that keep them safe. So about every 120 days, they will die. So you're constantly making red blood cells. Okay. White blood cells. These are the ones that are responsible for your immune response. When you stain them, they end up dividing into two groups. A group of white blood cells, when you stain them, when you look at them under the microscope, it looks like they have a lot of granules inside them. It's actually a lot of the tiny vesicles. So we refer to them as granulocyte cells, sites that have granules. And there's another group that doesn't have that. It just, you see huge nucleus in there. And those are agranulocytes. By the way, the blood and the level of the chemicals in there, and the number of cells and everything communicate a lot of things. So one of the first things when you go to the doctor and you say you're not feeling good, they give you a blood test. Hematology it's amazing and it's very complicated. I took 1 semester of it. I was interested. The book that I had to buy was this thick, and we only looked at the data portion of it, and because it was a generalized hematology. People who go into serology and hematology, I mean, they have to study that thing like crazy, the amount of communication. But it's fascinating how your blood can speak to you. So granulocyte, agranulocyte. As you can see, these guys over here, when you look at them, they look like they have granules in them, and these guys do not. Typically, granulocytes are the ones that are responsible for your inflammatory response. They are active mostly in the inflammatory response. Agranulocytes are the ones that are mostly lymphocytes are the ones that are active in your specific response, and the monocytes are the ones that give macrophages. So they will be active here, but they will be active in that other one too. They're the bridge between the two. So first, the granulocytes that we have basophils. These are basophils. When you stain them, actually they look so different. By the way, these are one single nuclei. It's not like it has 5 nuclei. It's lobed. It kind of branches off. So this one has 5 of them. This one looks like a beam. This one has kind of almost looks like it has 2 beams, but that's what they look like. And the coloring is pretty much right on spot in this image. Basophils, these guys, their job is anytime you damage cells and the cytoplasmic materials are released, basophils basically respond to that, to the cytoplasmic material. All of your white blood cells and your cardiovascular system and your capillaries basically respond to cytoplasmic material. To them, that means damage. To them, that means start inflammation. Basophils gets to the side, and based on what it sees there, it actually keeps releasing more inflammatory inducing chemicals. More chemicals that keep inflammation going, like histamines and things like that. The number one is histamine, and we're going to just focus on that. You have prostaglandins and all the other types of inflammatory inducing chemicals, but we're gonna just, you know, leave them alone. So basophils' job is that. Then we have eosinophils. Eosinophils mostly respond to when they get signals from parasitic worms in the area. They will release chemicals that will paralyze it and will destroy parasitic worms. So just keep that in mind. Although I gotta tell you that there are some forms of allergies that, for whatever reason, cause your eosinophils to increase in number. People who have asthma and are prone to getting asthma, they tend to have higher number of eosinophils. Then you have neutrophils. Neutrophils are your small phagocytic cells. They're the first ones that get to the site where they got the response, the inflammatory chemicals, that, okay, there is damaged cells here. Their job is to go through phagocytosis. They're tiny so they can squeeze through the tissue and get to the area. In addition to the process of phagocytosis, they can actually release some chemicals that starts interfering with the surface of the cells and can kill them. Because they keep producing this, they can actually die themselves too. By the same weapon they release, they can actually get killed. This is why when you have high levels of neutrophils in your body, they think of an infection, and most often that infection is bacterial, because you are producing a large amount of neutrophils. That means a lot of your neutrophils are responding, and neutrophils tend to remove things from your fluids, so it's outside, and bacteria is outside. So, and then mast cells, they're a group that look like basophils, but they will always be in the tissues, near your connective tissues or your barriers. So they are made by your bone marrow, but then they come out of the blood and they go into the areas near your barriers. So if your barriers get damaged, mast cells will immediately respond to that and release a large amount of inflammatory inducing chemicals. So you want them in those areas, because if your barrier is damaged, something's gonna happen. All right. It's in my pocket. So bone marrow, that's where you have stem cells, a group of stem cells in your bone marrow. Those cells can give rise to a large variety. So you don't need to know that. So the stem cell, the myoblast actually is the one that gives rise to your neutrophils, eosinophils, basophils, and mast cells. I like these images because they actually not only show you what they look like, and they tell you what they are. But don't worry about the name of the mast cells. Just know that's where it comes from, your bone marrow. Red blood cells, for example, it's erythroblast. Again, you have that one. Platelets are responsible for your blood clotting. So they come from megakaryocytes. We'll look at those. Okay, so the other types of white blood cells were agranulocyte. That means they don't have granules. There's two large groups here, monocytes and lymphocytes. Monocytes are the group of cells that are responsible for making your macrophages. Monocytes come and then basically they release and make your macrophages. Macrophages, when your bone marrow makes macrophages, it actually can send them to different locations. There's a group of macrophages that are roaming macrophages, and they will be in your blood, lymph, and all of that. Then there's another group that they come and they actually shrink them and make them look like, they call them dendritic macrophages. So a group of them, once they are there, monocytes, then they change and they make macrophages. A group become, and we just call them macrophages, they're roaming around in your fluids, and their job is to phagocyte. And they're very important because in addition to going through phagocytosis, they communicate with your specific immune response. They're the ones that release growth hormones, growth factors to force the cells to just go through replication and all of that. So they're very important. Then another group of monocytes, as soon as they become macrophages, they go through another change and they start looking a little bit smaller and thinner. They become what we call dendritic cells. Dendritic cells are actually macrophages that are sent outside of your blood in special tissues in your body. There is a group of dendritic cells in your skin. Another group that are in the mucous membrane. So these are your barriers. Your lungs are very important. You have a group of macrophages that are in your air sacs. We call those alveolar. Your brain, central nervous system, actually has a limited immune response because your neurons are so tender, you can damage it by a strong immune response. So they actually send specialized macrophages called microglia in that area, liver. So these are the ones that are found in high numbers in the areas, and they look like this. They're constantly going around and checking the cells. They're like, okay, are you mine? Yes, you're mine. Okay, go ahead. You're not mine. What are you doing here? So they need to respond to it really fast in your barriers, in your brain, in your lungs, because if you get damage in those areas, it can cause death. If your lungs are destroyed, you can die very fast. Your brain damage cannot be repaired. So those are called dendritic cells, and based on each area, they can have their own specific name.
So people who are considered immunocompromised, which one of these are they, like super low in, or is it kind of all of them?
Not necessarily they have to be low. It is possible to be immunocompromised because you're not producing macrophages. Or like a person with HIV, their CD4 cells, which are helper T cells, are being destroyed. So that's how you switch them. Sometimes all of these are so involved all over your body because another condition that you have is causing damage everywhere, like diabetes. One of the biggest things to control the sugar is because that excess amount of sugar can cause damage all over. So your core immune system is going, okay, oh my God, I have a micro tear here. Oh, my neurons in the legs are not functioning, so let me fix that. Then I gotta go here. Oh, she has high blood pressure because she has diabetes too. Heart issues because she has, so your immune system is stretched so much, they almost let go of their typical way that they're supposed to look and just pathogens.
Thank you.
You're welcome. All right, now lymphocytes. Oh, going the wrong way. Sorry. So lymphocytes, these are eventually will be divided into 3 types of cells: B cells, helper T cells. So B cells, helper T cells, and cytotoxic T cells. All 3 of them are responsible for your specific or acquired immune response. There's another group that is called the natural killer cell, natural T cell. That one is actually in your inflammatory response. I'll just mention it, but we'll focus on these lymphocytes. And we'll see what they do. Just right now know that they're lymphocytes. Okay. Almost there. Platelets are the 3rd kind, so they are basically produced, their job is to create blood clots. Blood clots are to prevent blood loss, when you created that little scab that you have, part of that is blood clot to, again, repair your barriers partially until the skin is fixed. And they interact with clotting factors such as fibrinogen, and they basically, the clotting factor, based on the presence of platelets, what ends up happening is they kind of change shape, they become sticky with platelets, they create this network, and they create blood clots. So just know that creates blood clots. That's as much as I want you to know. Platelets, the other important job of platelets is actually to release growth factors too. Platelets obviously are creating a barrier, a blood clot. They're trying to fix something, or put a temporary patch over something. So whatever has happened, that cell needs to divide. So they produce a lot of growth factor. Have you guys heard of the beauty treatment PRP? Kim Kardashian made it famous. Go ahead.
Like, what do you know about it, PRP?
Do you know about it?
Yeah,
What did they do?
they take blood plasma from you, they get your own blood, and they make a concoction, and they inject it into your ligaments, it could be our ligament, for
Yeah.
example, and other tissues to help strengthen it.
And help it
Different
reproduce.
disabilities and injuries.
Yeah. So they actually take the platelets out. So they
Yeah.
spin it and take the platelets. So PRP is a platelet treatment. They started using it for ligaments, like Kennedy said. So people who had, they had the ACL and all of that torn, they would add it, or so platelets, excess amount of platelets in one area releases ton of growth factors. So it pushes that little area into repairing and cell division. So it repairs better. Then people realize the skin in the area gets tighter too. How Kim Kardashian made it famous is some dermatologists and plastic surgeons then said, let's see if that helps with the skin tightness. So they take somebody's blood, they spin it down, they take the platelets, they inject the platelets. That platelet causes collagen to be made, and then the skin gets tighter. They also use it for hair loss. So they can add it to the area, and the platelet forces the hair replication. So that's the beauty part of it. I remember it's like people were, she did this like a few years ago, and it was like she's turning into a vampire. But it's not something new. She didn't come up with it. But all right. This is what a blood smear looks like. So you have red blood cells, white blood cells, different kinds of it there. They always count them. They count of like they do blood count for you. They order it. It actually means something. So differential blood count. Increased eosinophils means allergies. Increased neutrophils means bacterial infection. Increased lymphocytes means viral infection. So again, some examples. Finally, in the blood, like I said, you can find cytokines. Cytokines are chemicals released by white blood cells. And this is how white blood cells communicate, by a cytokine network. So, for example, when macrophage gets to an area and releases growth factor, it's telling the other cells, start replicating. It also sends an information to other white blood cells, hey, you might need to divide, or I might need more of you. If you're the specific soldier, make more of yourself. Histamine, that is really says, let's get inflammation going, and histamine attracts all the other cells that should respond to inflammation. So this is cytokines. Different cytokines that you can have. I don't need you guys to memorize it here. If you need to know it, you will see it when I talk about those specific reactions. Final one today, and I'll let you guys know. I know, your brain is swelling. Lymphatic system. Lymphatic system, so we have as humans, right? We have cardiovascular system. Cardiovascular system is responsible, it has a pump. The heart is responsible to sending blood to all of the tissues. Once it goes from artery to arterioles, then it gets to capillaries. That's the site of exchange. So basically plasma leaks out of your blood, and that has the nutrients in it and feeds your tissues. Red blood cells do the exchange of the gas, but they remain in the capillaries. So if you keep losing plasma, your blood is going to dry up. But if you keep losing plasma and then you keep making plasma, the fluid keeps getting into your tissue, you make more, you secrete more, you just keep going to get bloated and keep getting bigger and bigger, kind of look like I don't know if you guys have seen Wall-E. So the little humans, you're gonna be like a walking fishing tank, just a bowl of water with cells going here and there. So that plasma has to get back into the cardiovascular system. Call sign changes. When it's in the blood, it's called plasma. When it leaks out, it becomes interstitial fluid. Then that interstitial fluid has to be sucked in and taken to blood. That's the job of your lymphatic system. Sucks in the excess fluid. Once it gets into the lymphatic system, we call it lymph, and lymph empties into your cardiovascular, becomes plasma. So plasma to interstitial fluid to lymph to blood. We refer to those three as humor. So the three fluids, collectively they refer to as humor. So humoral means it's a fluid response in your fluids. So that's the main job of your lymphatic system. So if you have a damage or if you have a pathogen in your tissue, which one of these, and sorry, before going there. Lymphatic system is a vascular system also. It's a network, but it's not a closed circuit like your cardiovascular. It's just the lymphatic vessels are deep into your tissues and they like sponges at the tip of them. So they soak up it. So if you have an infection in a tissue, where do you think that if they need to be going somewhere, which part of these networks would they get into first? Lymphatic system or cardiovascular? Lymphatic. Because if you have it in this tissue and my lymphatic system sucks up the fluid, it's gonna suck up the bacteria with it. Because of that, and because you have a lot of white blood cells, and really, the job of your blood is technically under normal conditions in capillaries, all of the red blood cells line up and they do exchange of gas. If you have a ton of white blood cells in there, then they won't be able to do the job. So a lot of your white blood cells actually come and go to your lymphatic system. That's the other job of lymphatic system. Collect the white blood cells, keep them there, and it's beneficial. Why? Because that fluid, when it gets sucked up and travels through these areas to get to your cardiovascular system, in the areas that all the white blood cells are sitting there, they're not just having fun, they will be like checkpoints. Like, wait, what are you? Hey, you're not supposed to be here. And they can start a reaction. So that's lymph nodes. Let me play the animation for you guys.
Lymphatic vessels recycle excess tissue fluid that accumulates in the interstitium as a result of normal capillary leakage. The walls of the lymphatic vessels act as one-way valves, only letting fluid enter. Once in the vessels, the lymph is advanced toward the systemic circulation. Along the way, the lymph is filtered through several lymph nodes where it is inspected for foreign substances.
So lymph nodes is where you have your white blood cells stored.
Upon reaching the thoracic duct, the lymph re-enters circulation.
All right, so two jobs, and then lymph nodes are important. And in your body, you actually have lymph nodes scattered in different areas, and they will get the lymph from the areas associated with it. So cervical ones are the ones that are around your neck. This is the one that the doctor does this whenever they test. They're like, oh, okay, you're good. Or, ooh, did you have an infection recently? Something is large. It gets it from the head region, the upper respiratory region. Then you have the armpits one is basically the thoracic region. So lungs, chest area. You could have the, some also in there, but then you have a large group of them, huge ones in the abdominal region that basically worry about your abdomen. And then you have the groin region that your ovaries, testes actually respond to, and then from the legs, some are there. This is why they can actually, for cancer, metastasizing, they can actually look at the specific areas. So if it's like a breast cancer, they check under armpit, same thing with lungs. If it's, you know, something in the brain, they check these lymph nodes and so on and so forth. And they can tell you whether it's there or not, it's growing, not growing. In addition to that, we have some lymphoid tissues, like spleen is actually part of the lymphatic system, and its job is to monitor your blood. These lymphatic tissues basically act like big, huge lymph nodes. The other ones, you have the tonsils, the MALT. Mucosal associated lymphatic tissue is in your mouth, upper respiratory, and lungs. So that your tonsils, adenoids, they're like big lymph nodes. You also have gut associated, appendix. Actually, its job is to hold them, some white blood cells. Peyer's patch in your colon that I talked about. So the Peyer's patch is basically constantly, there's a group of cells called the M cells. They will take the antigens of all the or microbes that are in your colon. They will take them, take the antigens, and keep presenting it to your immune system. So your immune system has a list of what's in that area. So be aware of what MALT or GALT are. And lymphoid cells, why we call them the two big ones there, they're the B cells and T cells. That's why we call them lymphocytes. All right, we'll talk about those later on. So on Monday, I will start talking to you guys about your immune system. So it would be nice if you could review these. So when I throw all these different terms out, you're not going antigen, oh my God, what was antigen, and not listening to me at all, okay? All right. Okay, I have, if you want to look at your exams, so I actually ended 10 minutes early. If you want to look at your exams, stay. If you